and welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast here at the Mo Summit. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Joining us today, folks, is the co-founder and managing partner of Big Path Capital. Please welcome Michael Whelchel. Michael, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, appreciate it.
So interested to learn a little bit about your impact journey. What's the origin? Why'd you get into impact?
You know, I think it goes back. I was going through business school in the early 90s. I was in Chicago. And, all my classmates were headed to, investment banking or management consulting. You do an internship between your first and second year. And so, all my classmates were headed to one of those two career paths. And I got connected with this bank called Shore Bank in Chicago. And think of it as it was one of the first triple bottom line banks in the country. And I had never been up close and personal with a for-profit company like Shore Bank. But it was grounded out of this deep social justice mission. And I was just like, is this legal? Can you mix, is it allowed to mix these kind of things, two things, the purpose and the profit? And that summer it had me. I didn't know, I said, I don't know where we're in or how, but I'm going to find myself in this ecosystem somehow. And, couldn't find anything coming out of business school that merged some of those interests of mine, and then decided I'm going to get some good experience. Then went into private equity, and then 14 years in that career, I was like, that notion of leveraging capitalism for good never really left me. It's like, okay, if this isn't going to find me, I'm going to go find it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, got co-founded Big Path. And so, explain to me about that formation. With your experience in private equity, what was taking that leap like, and who did you start with? Sure. Yeah, so this was 2007. And just how timing works, it was early 2007 when I decided to quit my job at the private equity firm and co-found Big Path. And, it was before the financial crisis had really set in. I think had it been later in 2007, I probably, it was a jump, it was still a kind of an act of faith jump. But at that time when it was so dark in late 2007, 2008, it would have been kind of almost like foolish, especially having kids. So I'm just so thankful that it happened when it did, because I didn't see what was coming. I was able to kind of step out, into the river before I saw the tsunami coming down. And so, the first couple of years were tough given the larger economy. We got a couple deals done, and enough to say, hey, this feels like what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah. Interesting, and that remark of "is this legal?" is so profound, right? And do you find that targeting? I guess explain to your audience who your customers are, sure, and how you work with them. Yeah, sure. So we are a boutique investment bank, 100% focused on working with impact companies and funds. So on the company side, we're helping the Vital Farms or traditional medicinals of the world, help them either raise capital to bring in capital to help them grow faster. Or if they're ready to do some type of a liquidity sale of the event of their ownership, helping them find mission-aligned buyers. So those are the two things we do on the company side. On the fund side, we work with private equity, venture capital, impact funds that are raising their capital. And so you might have a fund that's looking to raise $500 million to go invest, and they hire us to go help them raise 20% of that. And what about the impact entrepreneur is a little bit different about your traditional entrepreneur, would you say? Oh, yeah. I think, the impact entrepreneur, typically their kind of center of gravity, center of mass is mission. They're trying to accomplish some, they want to try to see some change in the world, and then using the business as a vehicle to create that change, to bring that change into being. And so, you've got incredibly skilled business people as well, but then they're just driven out of this, kind of deeper motive. It's kind of, I would say, it's like, if you think of the Maslow's hierarchy, they're kind of coming out of something that's almost kind of at the self-actualization, and even, it's you got the self-actualization as what you're satisfied from a personal standpoint, but there also is this responsibility of the collective, of the larger society, and there is this kind of additional responsibility that's just not about themselves, even if it's not. So it's not more than just being self-actualized yourself, but it's this idea of being accountable to the collective.
Just out of curiosity, what is your due diligence process any different than traditional due diligence, and what kind of sides are you on?
Yeah. So I would say that for us, when we're deciding whether to work with a client or not, one is that's not traditional is what's the impact? I mean, we choose who we want to work with, and we want to work with companies and funds that are, bringing about the necessary change, that we see that's absolutely needed. And in many of those cases, they have like an incredible business model behind that because, they're kind of investing or they're thinking about things along some of these macro trends. So I would say one is like thinking about the impact they have. And for us, there's this layer of thinking about, hey, are they treating their employees, in a fair manner? That would not be a typical investment bank, would not really typically think about the different stakeholders and how that company's impacting those as whether they're going to take a deal or not.
How do you like working with the entrepreneur? Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously you need a lot of information from them. What's your process like? What makes you unique in that process, I'd say?
I would say one is that we care. I mean, it sounds kind of a little bit corny, but when we work with a company, we're want them to be able to scale their impact. And, so we're aligning with them around what, typically is driving that entrepreneur. So we, a lot of the clients we have, I end up being really good friends with them. And I think part of it is this, connection around the bigger, trying to accomplish something bigger. And then we're aligning them as a partner, and they're, looking to grow their impact.
Just out of curiosity, from a post-merger integration standpoint, have you worked with any organizations that have been acquired maybe by a larger organization, and how has that cultural fit been?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the example would be, Foley, David Kale. So when we were working with him, the idea wasn't to sell the company, but they found a strategic that he really liked. They liked him. And I think it was a company called Knoll, public office furniture company. And they were intrigued with Foley because of this mission-driven piece of the organization. The other piece they liked, that it was direct-to-consumer, but one of the pieces they really liked was of the mission-driven and how it created a different culture, a culture that they were interested in, like, hey, come be part of us, and we'd like to learn, how to do something similar in this broader organization. So in that case, they actually had influence on they actually had, you could think of it as they infected the host, right? Mm-hmm. And they in a really positive way.
And are you working on that integration aspect?
We typically don't do that. Yeah, usually, okay. We'll stay in touch with the client, but usually our formal engagement ends, once a transaction has been completed.
Got it. Very cool. Very cool. And so now this brings us to the Mo Summit. Yeah. So tell us about this large gathering, mm-hmm. What's going on here in Portland, Oregon.
Sure. So this is our 5th annual conference. We started the conference because we saw there was not an event that we were aware of in this ecosystem that really brought CEOs together of impact, high growth companies of consequence together. And you'd have other events, but you would find maybe only 30% CEOs. So really wanted to say, hey, even if it has to be smaller, let's make sure it's 90% plus CEOs that they can come together and really be peers with one another and develop relationships that they can then be a resource to them as they go back for the rest of the year. So it really is a network of resources that they could get tapped into.
I mean, one of the largest impact CEO gatherings in the United States. Talk about the quality of conversations that are being had in such an intimate setting.
Sure, yeah. And I think that's one of the differentiators you hear from the CEOs who attended is that there's this, kind of openness, this sense of vulnerability. You don't have to have everything, together. But these are obviously companies and CEOs that are doing incredible accomplishments. But there's this humility around what it takes to do this, and being vulnerable that you don't have it all together and there's a lot to learn, and that, what got me here is not going to get me there. And so I think that type of ethos is really both inspiring for people to come, and then also something they really feel like they are changed, by being here with these other entrepreneurs.
And whether it was Miyoko or Melanie talking about, their failures, their experiences, for someone listening to this that says, maybe that'd be something I'd like to attend. What advice do you have for them? Who are you speaking to?
Sure. Yeah, it's CEOs of companies that have some type of impact that's baked into their product or service. That their high growth is typically not the best spot for a startup. So companies, I'd say, that have a few million in revenue up to a couple $100 million in revenue, that are, trying to figure out, hey, how do I create a better culture? How do I have my company create more impact, both internally and externally? I think those would be people that are kind of open to thinking about that they have something to learn. It's a great place.
So we got an event coming up, June 2nd. You and Melanie DeBecco, the CEO of Toronto, are going to be speaking about how to find the right capital partner. Tell us a little bit about what to expect at that event.
Sure, yeah. So we recently worked with Melanie and Toronto to help them bring in a new capital partner, a 100-year-old company, family-owned, never had an outside investor. So this was their first, after 100 years, their first outside investor. And that it was a journey, for her, of really learning about how you do that. And I think it's typical of how she approaches a meaningful project within her company. They think of it as a learning journey, and how are we going to do this? And we're going to set out our key success factors. And as we go through this, we're going to look back and say, are we staying true to those key success factors that we laid out? And one of those for them was mission alignment. And so this is what's interesting, because even in impact companies where the CEO and the management team think so much about everything around, where do we, how are we going to treat our employees? What are our benefits? What do we think about what the product and how we deliver impact? Typically, when capital gets in the room, mission gets kind of escorted out the door. And so with Melanie kind of putting that at the top, really sets the stage to make sure that that at the end of the day that piece gets accomplished. And in that case, it's a really good fit. That it met all of her kind of key requirements. So the webinar will be talking about kind of unpacking that story, that learning journey for her.
And that's an interesting example, and what many investors and entrepreneurs kind of riff on. What makes a successful investor, CEO match?
I think it's a number of things. One would be the mission alignment. That whatever the impact and the mission, where like with Tarani, it's a people first, it's an opportunity company. You really don't get to the actual product, kind of qualities till 3 or 4 down. And so having someone who sees that the same way. And so in a specific case there, the first call that the investor that became the investor in the transaction, first call they had with Melanie, the whole call they talked about culture. They didn't even talk about Melanie's the Tarani's product. And so that just kind of gives you a sense of where they both started and where that alignment was. So I'd say that's first is alignment there. Time horizon is a key one. If the company really wants longer term capital and the investor is thinking more of a 5-year, needs to get out, sometimes that's not. You got to be really upfront about that. And then I think another one, just kind of a simple one, is their expectation of the CEO to have an active investor or a passive investor, and making sure that that's a match.
And explain the difference first.
So an active investor would be someone that that's in weekly contact with the company, and wanting to be a resource, wanting to be involved in decisions. Passive is someone that might be updated on a quarterly board meeting, but that's not really kind of participating in some of the kind of operational details.
Switching gears a little bit, this conference's theme was around regeneration.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about why you chose this theme and how it was influencing the conference.
Yeah. I think all of us, past 2 years, both, have affected from COVID, both personal lives and in our companies, and, wanted to, a lot of people had some really tough times over these 2 years. And so, there's this, for regeneration to happen, you just call it the cycle of life of renewal. You got to have death before there's birth. You got to have, the fall before spring. And that's in similar ways, I think in personal growth, organizational growth, you can call it mistakes, you can call it failure, you can call it learnings, challenges, but those are like the ingredients of personal insight, of personal growth. And so we wanted to kind of create a storyline that reframed a failure or a mistake or a challenge to be, that's the starting point. And so like one of the keynotes, Clayton Christopher said, in his life, he used to, run away from obstacles, but he learned to run to them because that's where the gold is. That's where the growth is. So this regeneration, reframing, all the experiences that we've had over the past 2 years to a storyline that these are things that should be, thought of as welcome and versus, denied or, deliberately, trying to run away from.
Well, whatever gets in the way becomes the way.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
What are some obstacles that you have had to overcome in your life?
Gosh, I think for me, just starting out the company, those first 2 years during the economic crisis of saying, gosh, was this really what I was supposed to do? Because I felt a calling to do it, but you're in there and you got 4 kids and you're not signing up those engagements as fast as it should, of a real kind of doubt about it. And then using that to go inward and being self-aware to be like, no, this is, I do think this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And that, that gives you kind of, I think, a deeper purpose and commitment to what you're about.
Perseverance is a great trait of leadership. Let's bring this home, Michael. What is your definition of a real leader?
And, I think like just as much as we've talked about, this whole idea of regeneration, to me, it brought a way that, that you approach there are these kind of learnings, along the way. And you can, as a leader, I think it's part of is helping the team not see those as failures. And either you could talk about celebrating the failures like Amy at Pallet talked about, that really reframing for the team that these are all learnings and things that have to be built upon to achieve what the team's trying to achieve. And how do you create that culture where that really is the case? Because it goes against so much of our traditional, how society thinks of things.
Well, Michael, appreciate you having us here at the Mo Summit.
Awesome. Yep.
For Michael Whelchel, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking go out there, reframe failure, and always, folks, keep it real. Thanks, Michael.
Cool. Awesome. Sure. Thanks.